know what she said, she might just change your life.
And time now for The Legal Beat with Neuberger Partners. Plain talk about legal, liberty, and social justice issues that impact all Canadians. What we need to know and want to talk about. And today, of course, we are joined by Joseph Neuberger. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And a lot to talk about
Yes.
today. Let's start with, I guess, the latest breaking story is that the judge has denied Dennis Oland bail pending appeal. Is that a
Yeah.
surprise?
It is to me. So in order to take a step back and understand it, you have to actually consider the evidence that was presented to the jury in the conviction. So in this case, the murder itself was considered to be, or the tool that was used was, I think, a drywall hammer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such hard blunt force trauma that it caused significant deep impressions in the skull. That would have caused, according to the uncontroverted forensic evidence, blood spatter everywhere in the room and certainly on the perpetrator. So what's really interesting is Mr. Oland is on surveillance leaving, and he's dressed in that jacket,
Right.
but he's neat. There's no blood on him whatsoever. He's not running. There's nothing about his demeanor which is unusual. There's no blood in his car. There's no blood found anywhere other than 4 specks of microscopic blood on that brown jacket, which could be attributable to many other ways that he could have got his father's blood, because there was a skin issue and other stuff. And the murder weapon is never found. So that's just one sort of source of evidence that leads you to conclude that the police may not have had the right person. We know that they focused early on Mr. Oland as a suspect because he was in debt to his father, the deceased, by about $500,000. And then what is even more troubling as a defense lawyer is the police who investigated the crime scene and investigated the offense are under investigation by the police service for their handling of the crime scene.
I walked all over it, right?
Yeah.
Coffee
It was
cups left here.
Not secured, a bathroom which would have presented probably some significant evidence.
If hands were washed or...
Yeah, if allegedly Mr. Dennis Oland had changed in there, they're using the washroom for days. It's never secured, never examined. There's a back door which the police had admitted at trial would have been the more likely escape route for the perpetrator. That door was not secured and never examined at all. So if there were any fingerprints or blood or anything of that nature, gone. That evidence is not there. So this is just a taste of how thin the evidence is. When you look at the Crown's theory as well, they never bother to explain how the murder was actually conducted and how he would have escaped. And when you look at the vehicle that he was driving, there's no blood in the vehicle. There's some stain of blood on a yacht that he had that again could have been attributable to some other time or some other way of transference. So in my humble opinion, the evidence that the jury relied upon to convict is extremely thin, and I think it's a very strong appeal. And the appeal judge had indicated, I think, I have to get this right, so pardon me for looking at it, but that there's no unique circumstances that would virtually assure a new trial or an acquittal. And as a result of that, releasing Mr. Oland to the community on bail pending his appeal would bring the administration of justice into disrepute or shake the confidence of the community, and I think that's just inaccurate.
But the judge also said that he doesn't believe that Mr. Oland is a danger to the public at large. But he thinks
Correct.
So it's only because he thinks it's going to undermine public confidence in the administration of justice.
Yeah.
I think that's already been done with
Yeah.
the evidence.
You would
that
think.
was
Yeah, I
presented
mean,
at trial.
it's a bit odd how a couple of murder cases going on, sort of tracks in some similar way that Netflix series that's going on, right?
So true. That's what came to mind
If you piece them
immediately.
together, it's kind of odd. But it's a very thin base for conviction. I think it's quite powerful, the appeal. And yeah, he should be released on bail.
Well,
So we'll see where it
can
goes.
they appeal that? Can they go again for a bail application?
You could go to the Supreme Court of Canada, typically this is your one shot on appeal, but you could go to the Supreme Court of Canada. He has a very strong appellate lawyer, Alan Gold, who's very seasoned, and extremely bright lawyers. So if there's a basis for appeal, but things can change also as the appeal unfolds. So time will tell.
Now, in Hamilton, Ontario,
Yeah.
the trial into Tim Bosma's murder continues, and I guess most recently that the family has just been devastated by what they're hearing. They've
Oh.
dissolved in tears
Horrific.
in court yesterday, as the police officer talked about finding 2 bones inside an incinerator, and that
Right.
testimony, left his widow and members of his family weeping as she,
Yeah.
poured over these
Yeah.
photographs.
Yeah.
When you're as a defense lawyer, what's it like having the family of a victim in there, like hearing all this? It must be difficult for a lawyer to be presenting this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's it's sometimes quite awful. I mean, I've had murder cases where the family's attending with T-shirts with a picture of the deceased on it, and most of the time I've found that if you're sensitive to certain issues at a trial, the family is generally respectful of the defense counsel, but sometimes that can be different. But you certainly feel for them because the evidence is very gruesome, and your job is to defend your client. And if you're doing that properly, you're going to be aggressively cross-examining and challenging the case for the prosecution. So
And how
that's
do you
your
think
job.
this case
Yeah.
is going? Because it seems, when you just read the reports in the
Yeah.
newspaper, it seems that the evidence is
Overwhelming, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we spoke about this a few weeks ago. I said the Crown will slowly lay out the evidence piece by piece and build the case. So this is now the second part of evidence, which there was previously evidence about the search of the car that Mr. Millard was driving, which was a Yukon, and in that search of the car, I believe on the keychain for the Yukon is found a key for Mr. Bosma's truck that was for sale. And so that's fairly incriminating evidence. And then the receipt for the purchase of this animal incinerator, which is on Millard's property,
Yeah.
and sure enough, that's where the remains are found. And there's burn spots also on the property, and there's this I guess dirt bike rider had noticed, or some rider who'd noticed the machine there and found it very odd, and ultimately led the police to it. So highly incriminating evidence, very sensational type of evidence. It's a very tragic set of facts, and very spooky, frankly, when you put it all together. It's building its case, but it's very very tragic.
We're
Yeah.
not hearing much about Smitch yet.
Not yet,
No.
not yet. This is right now. It's focusing right now on Millard, and that's where this evidence is coming out. So
All right, let's talk about it. Now the Alberta NDP.
yeah, this is unbelievable.
Well, they have said, oops, made a mistake.
Yeah.
This is all about banning Ezra Levant's The Rebel from press briefings for the Alberta, the governing NDP, because they did not consider it a journalistic source.
Right.
Now, we saw the Canadian Association of Journalists, we saw people say, okay, usually it seems in Canada, the media tends to support more left-leaning other members of the media
Right.
and have some
Right.
distaste
Right.
for the right side. But what's your take legally on his status?
Well, as I understand it, you don't need some special certificate or degree to be a journalist in Canada. If you write about news in Canada, politics or something like that, you'd be considered a journalist. So,
But he went up in court and said he wasn't. He said he had never called himself a reporter. He was a commentator, a pundit, but he was not a reporter. So if you deny being a reporter in court, can that not be used against you later?
but still, what are we talking about? We're talking about banning a member of the public or members of the public from a source of information on the internet that you don't like their political leaning.
Right.
So that is a serious, this is why I find this very serious. This is a serious affront to our freedom of the press and to our own democracy. I mean, anybody should be able to attend media events
Okay.
and listen to it, and if they want to write on it, they write on it. That's the game. When you go to politics, you take the good with the bad.
That's right.
I mean,
I understand that, but removing Ezra Levant from the
Right.
situation, let's
Yeah.
just talk anyone. With this rise that we are having in citizen journalism, people that are blogging, I mean, there are, if I want to go and cover Queen's Park, I have to get accredited. You have to get accredited. You
Yeah.
have to do all that kind of stuff. There are no standards, as you said. I mean,
No.
this is the problem. And one would hope that he's carrying libel insurance because he Ezra Levant ends up in court a lot.
Yeah.
But you can't let everybody in. I mean, you'd have to be holding your news conferences in stadiums if every blogger wanted to attend.
That's
Like
true.
where do you draw the line? Where is somebody going to draw the line about who can just be allowed
But it
in to
feels
cover
like
the
they're
event?
all there. I mean, anything I've been to in the past couple of years, I feel like every blogger for a 200-kilometer radius is there.
Yeah, but
It's hard.
look, let's face it. I mean, our politics across Canada is not as exciting as other places, and I don't think 500 or 1,000 bloggers out there want to attend every media event. I mean, that's it's not really reality. There are no. I mean, I think the larger issue is there is little regulation of what is posted on the internet through social media, and what is there stays. So anybody who's reported on could actually be quite concerned about false information on the internet, and then how do you deal with that?
It's accountability.
Right.
So you have to deal with accountability, and there can be rules and regulations, but we have libel and slander laws which are effective, and so you can sue and you can take steps to deal with it, and the service providers for like Twitter and others are taking responsibility for erroneous or hateful information which is up on the internet. So there are legitimate ways to deal with it. But I think at the core of this, if an NDP government doesn't like the right-leaning position of a particular blog, that's not good enough to bar them from coming to a media event. And I think it's extremely important that as a public and in order to ensure our democracy, that we don't bar people from these events because we just don't like what they say.
I absolutely agree with you, but I think we need to have some standards. I mean, do you have to go to journalism school? Do you have to carry libel insurance? Do you, what kind of accreditation to call yourself? Certainly a reporter has to be unbiased, straight down the middle. I used to love it when I would be accused of being a left-wing hack and a right-wing flack for the same story. I thought,
Yeah.
perfect, I
did
did it
yes.
right. But if you're a commentator, you can commentate on anything. But to
Yeah.
call yourself a reporter, you need to be unbiased and have no slant. You are reporting the facts.
So, in that case, do you trust the person, or should you trust the organization they are standing in front of? Because at that point, they would have gone over who the person is.
But also a lot of this has changed. If you look at what we call mainstream media, I mean, when you look at a fair amount of commentating, it's no longer down the middle. The opinions are expressed all the time. You see that certainly with the U.S. media, less so in Canada because, again, we're Canadians. But, we're seeing this across the board with mainstream media where really it's not down the middle. We're not looking at something that's looking at both sides. There's always been slants to it. And it's this explosion of the ability to do things on the internet. And YouTube, you can have a channel now, right? We can all have our own channel, express our views, and we may get subscribers, and we can earn money doing that. So I mean, it really is a whole new world out there.
Absolutely. Now, okay, so maybe the journalism profession is in need of a little reform, but we are seeing now more and more stories referring to Jean Gomeshi's trial, which is highlighting the need for deep legal reform.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, very frightening type of dialogue. And I had read something, a comment by a lawyer, I'm not going to name him, but he typically acts for complainants on what we call third-party records applications, and had talked about how the criminal justice system is not friendly or accommodating to victims of sexual assault. So first of all, and actually said that maybe sexual assault cases should be taken out of the adversarial forum. So I have no idea what that means, and it's such a dangerous comment. To further some sort of debate about this is, in my opinion, absurd, because sexual assault, murder, drug charges, they're all the same. They have to be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. We have the presumption of innocence in Canada, and there should be no lowering of the threshold or the bar of proof beyond a reasonable doubt because of a particular type of complainant or because of the charge. And it is frightening to read this. And so I don't think it's going to gain any traction at all. But for the public, the people don't realize until they're charged that how easy it is to get charged, and how sometimes false allegations do get made, and what happens to a person when they are falsely accused. Because when somebody's arrested on something, there can be a press release. It goes on the internet. And then quietly a year and a half later, when charges are withdrawn, there's no press release.
Yeah, nobody reports.
That's not
that the
interesting.
charges were dropped.
Right.
Yeah,
No, it's
absolutely
not interesting to
No.
anybody. And this happens, more often than the public may think. And we have to protect our rights. And the criminal justice system is a criminal justice system where people who are legitimately found guilty is done on a standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, period.
When it comes to sexual assault cases, we've been talking to a lot of women, and a lot of women agree that they're not happy with the change that was made when the word rape was removed and description was moved to making everything just sexual assault, because there's a big difference between somebody pinching you on the butt
Right.
and raping you.
Right.
So is there any chance that those descriptions would be looked at for maybe adjustment, moderation?
Categorization.
This is an extremely interesting issue. So everything from a touch or an unwanted kiss to a full-blown, sexual assault, which involves what you typically would consider to be a rape, is a sexual assault.
Exactly.
And everybody who's found guilty of that, if it's a touching, can wind up on the sex offender registry, and there's all sorts of implications as a result of that. So, Crown attorneys generally do assess a case carefully, but it is such a broad spectrum that one might imagine that we should actually break down categories of
I would.
offenses to make it a little bit more understandable and fair, because we can't treat all those fact scenarios identical. But it still doesn't change what will happen at a trial, because cross-examination of any complainant, and the reason I keep saying complainant, although people regard them as victims, they are not a victim in the criminal law sense until a jury or a judge decides beyond a reasonable doubt that the offense has been committed. And cross-examination is, a 1,000-years-old method of getting at the truth. And it's necessary in order to protect people's rights. So I don't see how that can change. And as I've said before, there's a lot of supports within the system to assist complainants who come forward with allegations. And this was just a perfect example of really unreliable evidence and people not telling the truth and communicating and colluding about evidence when they shouldn't have.
Yeah, I'm not expecting a conviction.
No, it's going to be acquittal across the board. I mean, this case, it's toast. Stick a fork in it, it's done.
And so are we, because we're all
right.
We're out of racetrack for today. So that is today's Legal Beat, brought to you by Neuberger Partners. And thank you very much for coming in and
Thank
talking to
you.
us. You can always visit them online at nrlawyers.com. They are official experts in criminal law, right?
Yes, we are. Thank you very much.
Okay, and we'll be right back here on What She Said, Sirius XM 167.
Click the channel subscribe button for full-length interviews and more from What She Said here on YouTube.